Welcome once again. This is Writer's Corner. I'm Alan Miller. I'll be hosting, and once again we bring you two of Minnesota's outstanding writers. On my left, Julie Holmes, who is a mystery writer, and in addition to being a mystery writer, an award-winning mystery writer, Julie is the president of Sisters in Crime. Now, Sisters in Crime is an organization that has both sisters and brothers in crime. As a matter of fact, I'm one of them, and of recent vintage, and she'll talk about that as well as writing. On my right is Shawn Otto, and Shawn has been here before on Access to Democracy. Shawn is really unique because he is not only an award-winning novelist, he is not only an award-winning science writer, and one of his books is right behind me on the table, and he has also been nominated for an Academy Award for one of my favorite films, The House of Sand and Fog. So he's going to talk to us also about how he can blend all of these talents together. And with that, I will turn it over to both Shawn and Julie. And Shawn, why don't you kick it off?
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having us here. I knew that you couldn't stay out of TV, so I wasn't surprised to see an email from you inviting me to your new show. And I assume, Julie, that with the last name Holmes, you're a descendant of one of the most famous literary crime characters, right? Sherlock.
Absolutely. And so it was preordained that I would be a mystery writer.
Right. How did you get into mystery writing, and what drew you to it?
Well, I've been writing since I was in elementary school. And I started out in science fiction and fantasy. But as you maybe know, the characters sneak up on you and the stories kind of follow them. And I started reading mysteries, Agatha Christie, of course, and it just drew me. I couldn't really keep out of my head what would happen if, all the crime stuff, you see it all on TV. I read the Three Investigators books, which most people don't remember, but it always just fascinated me, trying to figure out. It's a puzzle, and puzzles are fun, and I think everybody just loves. That's probably one of the things besides the characters that people love about mysteries is that they're puzzles, and the challenge is, can you figure it out before the characters can?
You're right. So what do you think the most important thing about creating a great character is? Because I agree with you. I think that especially in mystery writing, characters really carry the whole work of people think of it that it's about plot, but it's really about having a really compelling character and putting them in difficult circumstances.
Absolutely. And in fact, I've done classes on how to write mystery, and that's one of the first questions I ask people is, okay, so why do you read mysteries, or why do you want to write a mystery? What appeals to you? And 9 times out of 10 they say character. And I think from talking with readers, what people like about characters is that the ordinary people most of the time, they've gone through their own trials that a lot of other people have, their own struggles. They've had challenges, whether it be overcoming an addiction, whether it be getting out of a bad situation, circumstance, violence, abuse. They work on redeeming themselves, and it's a struggle for them to be good sometimes, which I think a lot of people is you root for the character. But if a character is three-dimensional, meaning, and that's the trick, if a person feels like they could have lunch or have coffee with this character, I think as a writer you've accomplished what you set out to accomplish, is creating somebody real that readers care about. And that is actually the key, having a character that readers care what happens to them in the course of the book.
Right. One of my favorite things is thinking about there's the protagonist, but then there's the antagonist, or in a mystery or in a crime fiction, that's the bad guy. But I love thinking about them because a lot of times, especially like when working in movies, it's a truism in movies that the movie is only as strong as the bad guy. And no bad guy thinks that they're the bad guy.
Right.
So you can't think about them as being a cardboard character.
Right.
You really have to dimensionalize them and think about them being a three-dimensional, empathetic character. They might make bad choices based on the challenges that they've gone through, like we all do, right? But they might maybe make them just a little bit more extremely.
Right, and I think a lot of times antagonists, especially sympathetic antagonists, they see what they're doing as being beneficial to society at large, or to themselves, which is probably more the case. But by creating a character that thinks they're doing what they think is right, I think it really rounds the character out, and it does make the antagonist sympathetic. Because you got Moriarty, and it's always just head to head. But do we care what else Moriarty is doing? Probably not. But it's sometimes a challenge to create a rounded bad guy.
Right. Yeah. What have you thought about that? You've done a little bit of crime writing yourself lately.
Lately, yes, and I'm not going to get into this conversation, but I just sent another book off to the publisher, so we'll see how that goes. Very happy about the first
Congratulations.
one. But you managed to write in 3 different genres. So let's talk about that a little. You're certainly a scientist and a science writer. Then you have written novels, and Sins of Our Fathers takes place really in Native American land, and your screenplay was a whole different genre also. So how do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, I started out as a movie writer, and then I moved into science writing, and then I moved into writing novels. And for me, the thing that I kind of needed to find a way to organize my thinking in science writing, because there are so many different things spiraling around, and how do you make it compelling? And I realized that it's all narrative. No matter what you're writing, it's a story. And you have to structure your presentation of the facts. Even if they're facts, you have to structure the presentation along a narrative arc by posing a question and making an exploration. And then readers want to go along with you. And for me, that was a real insight that helped me kind of crack nonfiction writing, that it still needs a narrative structure. It still poses questions that draw readers in. And the mystery of solving those questions is what makes it compelling.
And you've certainly been acknowledged for your success in that regard. I mean, one of your books is right over my shoulder here. And you won all kinds of awards for that book. So.
A couple, yeah. It did pretty well.
So do you, when you write your nonfiction, you write your nonfiction and then do you write fiction at the same time, or you do just your nonfiction work and then finish that and then turn to fiction?
Yeah, I don't know if there's any real reason for that, but it's just kind of the way that I work. I think for me the reason is pretty idiosyncratic. There are people that I know, like, Kate DiCamillo, I'm just in awe of how she writes. She once told me that she sits down and she writes 2 pages a day and then she stops. And even if she's in the middle of a sentence, she stops. And what that does is it keeps her mind going in the background, I guess, about what's going to happen next, how she's going to finish the sentence. I wish I could do that. I completely wish I could. I tend to be obsessive compulsive about writing. When I'm in it, I have to really swim in it. And I think maybe that's just because I don't know, I can't keep track of all the threads as well as maybe some other writers can. Or maybe it's just that I'm just obsessive in my approach to it or my love of it. But when I'm in a story, that's kind of what I think about, and that consumes my attention. So yeah, so I don't really split and jump back and forth.
So you don't have to worry about, okay, in the morning I'm writing nonfiction, and then you have to have the mind shift back to creative, back to fiction.
Yeah, no. At least that's, not so far anyway.
Now, Julie, you also are involved in an organization called Sisters in Crime.
Mm-hmm.
And here in Minnesota, it's actually a national organization as well. This is the Minnesota chapter, and you're the president at the present time.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about Sisters in Crime.
Well, Sisters in Crime, the national organization, started in 1986. We like to credit Sarah Paretsky, but there were actually 26 women crime writers who got together at actually not this past year when BoucherCon was in Minneapolis, but the previous in 1986 when BoucherCon was in Minneapolis. BoucherCon is the mystery reader conference. It's huge. I mean, they get people from all over the place. But they got together, these 26 writers, because what they discovered was a lot of women who were writing books, really good books, weren't didn't get acknowledged for being the good authors that they were. And so at this point, the national organization has 4,600 members worldwide. And every state in the country just about has a local chapter, at least one local chapter. California has 3 or 4. But the goal of the organization was to help women crime writers, but crime writers of all genres, to work on their career and to get recognized for it.
And a funny thing happened in Minnesota, however, with Sisters, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm not real clear on the history because I've only been a member of the local chapter for maybe 8 years. So I'm not real clear on how the organization started, but I do know we have nearly 100 members, and we're considered one of the larger chapters, and we're also considered one of the most active chapters. So we have our meetings every month, and we invite everyone from, we've had the Hennepin County Medical Examiner talk to us, we've had FBI agents, we had the forensic psychologist who interviewed Jeffrey Dahmer come talk to us. That was interesting. And we have people who are knowledgeable in the craft come and talk to us about various things. Your script writing, we have next month, our presenter will talk about script writing, screenplays.
Who is it open to, Sisters in Crime?
Sisters in Crime is open to any writer or reader. You don't have to be a writer. The Sisters in Crime has a division for readers. We welcome just about anybody, unless you're not nice.
You don't have to be a sister either.
No, you don't. We have, in fact, our vice president is a Mr. in Crime, is one of our brothers.
So if you're not a published writer yet, but you want to be, or you're just dabbling with it and you're exploring it, those people are welcome too.
Sisters in Crime is very supportive. There's actually an online chapter called the Guppies. And when that was started, Guppy was kind of a play on the great unpublished. And they do, it has expanded since then to, there's all kinds of published writers and unpublished writers are members, but it's an online chapter, so you can be anywhere if you don't have a local chapter close by. But yeah, one of the things that's wonderful about Sisters in Crime is you have so many resources with all of the writers who have gone on their journey all different ways, and they've had different experiences. They know people, and it's a good way, especially if you're a writer or a burgeoning writer, to learn to ask questions. How did you do this? Where did you go to? Do you have a recommended editor?
Is there research source?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of members know people in law enforcement. They've been in law enforcement, PIs, lawyers. It's just rich with resources.
And what's the breakdown of males and females of the local chapter?
Local chapter, I would probably guess it's close to 1/3 to 2/3, 1/3 men to 2/3 women, roughly. It's hard to know because the numbers, not everybody comes to the in-person meetings, and not everybody attends the hybrid meetings or the online meetings. So I see the list of names, but I don't stop and
So
and
Julie,
think
if
about.
somebody is a guppy writer, as you call it, and they're thinking about how to start this, how to wrap their mind around it, what's your best piece of advice to just approaching the craft and getting going?
Read.
Okay.
Read. Lots. If you talk to any writer, and I'm sure it's true for you too, you're a voracious reader. And that's the first thing that they recommend is read the types of books you want to write, because then you get an idea of what other people are doing. The other thing would be to write. I mean, it doesn't have to be good. It just practice. Take some classes. I know the Loft is famous for offering classes, but there's a lot of online classes, and I got a certificate in fiction writing from the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which that program was shut down over the pandemic. But there are some really good online classes, and you don't need an MFA. It's just learn the basics.
When you do write, you need someone to read that writing and critique it. Now, one of my first efforts was decimated by Shawn Otto, and
I wouldn't
Ouch.
say decimated. I would say healthily incised.
But that's what helps you get better, and it's really essential.
And the Loft does do online classes too,
Yes.
Which is taught by published writers, which is a great resource. We're lucky to have it here.
Of which you have been one.
Yeah, I used to be the chair of the Loft.
Okay.
And
But even the writing conventions. There used to be a writing convention every year in Madison. That again got shut down through the pandemic. But they will always have panels on how to write. Writing this way. There's one search, and you'll find tons of different writing retreats, writing conferences, where you can learn the craft.
and we are particularly lucky here in Minnesota to have the Loft, because the talent, the teaching talent at the
Absolutely.
Loft is really unique.
Yeah,
And,
there are more publishers here, I think, and more writers here, I think, partly outside of anywhere beyond New York and LA, probably because of the Loft.
That's why this program exists, because we have so many great writers.
And we do.
And it's not just novelists, but great writers, such as science writers and elsewhere, that it seemed a shame not to share it, especially with that we have 35 cities now in our network, not to share it and make it available. And as I say, this is the 4th show, but it has been so well received, and the feedback that we're getting is very good. And And I have writers contacting me saying, how can I get on this show also?
Well, I think it helps people understand just how many writers there are, but there's a lot of not so well-known writers, especially outside of the metro area. I mean, you had Brian Luderman on, you had Christine Husum, who are both, and Carl Brookins, who are all members of our Sisters in Crime chapter. But people recognize William Kent Kruger. They don't necessarily recognize me or Brian or Christine. So this is a good way, I think, to help lesser known writers who are still fantastic authors.
To your point about getting going and reading a lot, Julie, I once talked to Vince Flynn about how he got started and what he thought the most important thing was. A similar question. And Vince, he was just a super great, generous guy. And he said that because he got to start as a bouncer at O'Gara's while he was working on his first book, Term Limits, and he said he made a conscious choice he loved Scott Turow and he loved Tom Clancy, and he wanted to find a tone that was a combination of the two of those. And I think that was actually a really smart, kind of methodical way, but capturing a tone or a space that you want to write into was really important. And it allowed him to kind of create a brand almost that was really unique, and he did really well with it. And I think that approach of just about thinking about what do you love, what do you tend to gravitate towards as a reader, and think about, all right, that's maybe where I should be working as a writer. And think about what different writers maybe that you can combine. That's another thing that we do in working in Hollywood, is talking about a movie. You know, it's I don't know, Terms of Endearment meets Superman or something like that, and it's mashing two different ideas together creates a unique third.
Yeah, and that sounds like as an author, when you're ready to pitch your book, query letters, you want to have comparable titles, so that it gives a potential editor, agent, an idea of where what is your book like, because then they have a better sense of, is it something that they're going to like as much, or maybe not. If they don't like reading Vince Flynn, well, they might not. That might not be for them. It would be for a different person.
And I also want to say, and Alan, you can pay me that $5 later, but Holding Court, this guy's first novel, is world class. I really think that anybody would love it. And,
I really appreciate that.
It's become actually more timely these days as the court itself has gotten a little bit more politicized and a little more in the headlines. And I could certainly see over some of these recent decisions somebody deciding, well, I'm going to do what Alan talked about in his book. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
I was kind of prescient there. I don't know how that happened, but it was fortuitous. And
it's a great book. It's a great story.
Thank you. I think you'll like the next one, if that's the case, even better.
All right.
Same characters. Same characters.
Great.
We're maybe on our way to a series, so I don't know.
All right.
If I last long enough. Well, we have a little under 3 minutes left, and time seems to fly. Very interesting. What about titles?
Titles are tough. Titles are really tough. And you want to get a title that sounds catchy, gives a reader a little bit of an idea what might be in the book. And when you get picked up, if you're traditionally published, you get picked up by an editor, they're going to want you to change it, so don't get too attached to titles. That's what they always say. But catchy titles, Gone Girl. You have The Fault in Our Stars. You've got Sins of the Father. So
it certainly was a catchy title, and it certainly was consistent with the book.
Yeah, and Murder in Plain Sight, play on words. with
Yeah, I think that that's kind of the common theme is think about the core of the story and what is a good double entendre. A good title is almost always has multiple meanings.
And having less than perfect characters also is very helpful.
Yes. Yeah. Well, who wants to read about a perfect character? They're just irritating, right?
And see also Barbie, who just came out in a movie. But
I know. I'm actually kind of interested to see what Greta Gerwig does with Barbie, the kind of the ultimate inherently conflicted female character. Right?
I had a lot of wonders about that myself. And well, we're really winding down to the last minute here. It's been really interesting. And I know you didn't know each other before this, but obviously your questions back and forth are really not only helpful to me, but helpful to the audience. And any final thoughts in the last few seconds?
If you want to write, keep writing.
persistence.
For sure.
Absolutely persistence. Just keep doing it.
Yeah, it's not about talent.
And keep reading.
And keep reading.
Absolutely. It's so important.
It is.
One of the things, of all the
Stephen
writing
King.
I've done over the years, I mean, I started late in life as a novelist, but I have read really vociferously.
Stephen King said that if you're going to write, you have to read.
Yeah, and he also said that writing good stories is like archaeology. It's uncovering dinosaur bones. You just start and have the faith to follow the outline of the bones as they lead you.
Shawn Otto, Julie Holmes, thank you so much. We'll be back next month with 2 other writers. Thank you.